I'll put it way over there.
Do
Put a little person.
And then we can actually.
All right, shall we get started?
Alistair,
Let's start.
Councillor.
other go.
Councillor.
Oh,
Oh, do you need me?
Yes,
Oh, shit.
yeah, right. Just take your time and we'll be ready when you're.
Answer your
No,
phone.
go for it. This is only Russell McPherson, don't worry. Yeah, Russell.
Perhaps we can announce that in the future.
We just changed.
Any
We've got to
apologies
finish tomorrow,
from
but yeah, I'm
from Nichols.
Okay.
And at the moment, we've got an apology for lateness for Alistair. Only a minute.
Sorry, team.
Get started, councillor.
I'll move it.
So Jeremy moved the apologies from Nicol and seconded by Lyndall. Any declarations of interest today? No. And public forum, I'm not aware of any of those. Confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting, the 22nd of February. Would like to move the true and correct record.
Happy to do so.
That's Phil and a seconder Jeremy. All those in favour, please say aye. No items of urgent business. No questions. Okay, so we'll go on to the finance report. 9.1. And Tony are here to draw our attention to any things that we should be alerted to.
Thank you, Chair. I will take the report as read. And saying that, I'll just perhaps highlight some numbers that are important and the trend, I suppose. My overall advice to council was that what we're seeing in front of us is a continuation of the previous reports. We are seeing an increase in income above budget, and we have now for the quarter and for the year to date a small variance in expenses above budget. The result is an operating surplus of 803,000 better than budget. In that income, what we're noticing there and what you're seeing in front of you is $1.2 million favourable, which means we've got $1.2 million more income than budgeted. It comes from two areas particularly. One is a one-off, it looks like a one-off increase in our marine fee. $500,000 approximate, better than budget, and that is because we budgeted for the marine fee on an increasing number of cruise ships that we saw coming in, but as it turns out, the cancellations were less this year, Chair, than the previous year. So the previous year we saw a number of cancellations coming through for different reasons, weather and the biofouling rule. That has industries adapted to that, and we saw only one cancellation this year from that rule. So as a result, we're going to have an income to the council that's higher than we expected. The cruise ship numbers for next year are not the same, so we're seeing this as a one-time extra increase. In addition, in the income, we've got projects that weren't in the original budget that have come through from government, such as the farm plan projects and things that are showing as income above budget. In reality, we have expenditure to offset that, but it shows in these financial results as an increase. We have people and contracted consultants there above budget for the period ended March. And the resultant forecast then of an operating surplus that will be $480,000 above budget, or $480,000 worse than budget. It's a $5.9 million operating deficit versus a $5.5 million operating deficit. I looked at the April reports and we know what's going on internally, and I can assure you that staff are working to do their best to ensure that that comes back closer to budget by the end of the year. But at the period that we forecast this in March, that's what we were seeing. Subsequently, I suggest that we will be better than that forecast and hopefully closer to budget. What is also coming through at the bottom there, investment income, we have year to date $382,000 better than budget for in what we call realised income, which is actual dividends and actual interest earned. That's a reflection of the increase in interest rates that we're able to achieve now on deposit. 15 months ago when we set this budget wasn't the case. So we're going to end the year with $1.3 million of that kind of income in interest and investments. The income from the movement in the share market or the portfolio of investments shows 1.7 million to date. And you'll know that can change at any time. In the month of April, that actually reversed by 420,000. So we don't budget that, as we've discussed before, for the purpose of subsidising rates, for that very reason that it is fickle. So the result to date, Chair, is year to date before government funded projects, a surplus of, well, a variance of 2.9 million, which will end up at the end of the year at 1.4. Largely as a result of that increased income from investment. The government funded projects, although they have red on them, 2.3 unfavourable, that's a reflection of the timing of receipt of the income for those projects. So we've got another 2 months yet to finish those projects, and that income will come in, but it's just going to be later than we anticipated when we wrote this budget.
Is that partially money going out to Blue Cliffs?
Which councillor?
The revenue that we've got 2.3, because we still owe money there, do we?
The 2.3 is specifically around the Jobs for Nature and the shovel ready projects only. So that's a timing difference for the shovel ready construction projects.
So we haven't put money out to the Blue Cliffs operation?
Yes, we have. It's not shown in as government funded, it's an operational expense.
Okay, so that's gone back in, but then that's going to end up being reimbursed, isn't it?
We've made an assumption in here that actually that will be reimbursed to Emergency Management Southland. It is a cost of Emergency Management Southland. The deed of Emergency Management Southland suggests that it will be refunded by the council responsible. So on that basis, we have accrued it using accounting language on the assumption that it will be refunded to Emergency Management Southland. Before I go on to any other statements, Chair, is there questions on this page?
Just carry on, please. Or any other questions? All right, Jeremy?
Just with the contractors and consultants, is it contractors or consultants, the 400K? I mean, always we're consultants and
Mainly contractors. What we see there is, I think it says here where, sorry, it does say here the offset. So 312,000 of that is actually for those new projects that were unbudgeted at the time, or unknown at the time. So there is an amount greater than that. But as I say, we're working towards balancing that out.
so just to clarify, so the 970,000 in variance forecast for that full year, that's around the contractors and consultants. Like in that same paragraph where you talk about 312 included in the overall 970.
Yes, at that point, that variance forecast would be 970,000.
But as you say, it could be the contract. Well, it's always, I'm just trying to see the consultant, if we could at some stage understand where that money's
The
going.
contractors are people working on
actually doing the physical
You're
work.
doing the work or writing the plans, in this case, particularly for those unbudgeted projects, which are, we employ people to take on short-term projects. Consultants, is your lawyer or your policy advisors.
Is it hard to,
Lyndall, then Alistair.
Thanks, Chairman. You said that staff were doing their best to, it sounds a bit weird, doing their best to get things back to closer to budget. What does that mean exactly? Does that mean that they are likely to not get some of the program of work completed, or does it mean that they are trying to do things differently so that the work is completed?
Well, both, I imagine. We're simply looking at work that does need to be finished by the end of the year and work that may not have to be finished by the end of the year, or just to ensure that we're using the funds appropriately amongst all the activities. Sometimes we think we're going to finish something and we just physically can't, and we end up with that budget not being used by part of the council that does need it. It's being realistic about the timing of work at this stage.
So not necessarily reducing the outcomes.
Not deliberately affecting the outcomes, just simply trying to be very clear about at this time of year what can and can't happen.
Furthermore, budget's a budget.
Yeah.
So actually it is also about, working with finance to interrogate the numbers and being really clear that where pieces of work have been completed and yet there may still be money in the budget for, various reasons, projects coming under budget, and being able to actually identify those areas of spend or not spend as well.
Thanks.
Very aware that, it's a fine balance, particularly at this time of year, between being able to finish those things that you need to finish in the season and ensuring that things that do need to be done have to come out.
could we get split the contractors and consultants? Because when I see contractors, I think of a truck tipping stuff somewhere.
Yes.
And consultants are people that are writing things for, for us, just employed for a job, to do it. Is it easy or is it hard?
It's easy enough, councillor, if that's a request of the council. Definition here is different. You think of catchment operations probably when you think of contractors,
Yes.
but for us, contractors are people employed short term to replace staff that are unavailable, perhaps, or where there's a reduction in staff, to take on outwork where it's appropriate. So it's a different sense.
Well, the other way, and what I'm concerned of is the legal costs that this outfit puts out. Because they must be massive.
So just to follow that up, is that something that we can do, Tanya? Is that a reasonable
Bring that
request?
back to the council.
Yeah. Okay, so that would be identifying, you won't be identifying them down to company level, but you'll be still grouping them between the physical works contractors and the consultants who provide us with advice, I suppose, we're talking about.
Absolutely, and we can do that by activity. You can see the offset because, as I said, there's a substantial offset against income projects or projects that they are funded. In fact, we report to SEC each month the split between these groups of activities, between what is funded and what is by external projects and income and what is not funded. So
Okay, is that okay, Alistair?
No, I'm just split it down a bit so as we get a better understanding.
Jeremy?
Yeah. Sort of clarified, because there's about 970. It'd be good to, there are certain projects that are coming to an end. I'd like to see what they had cost us as a council. And it's probably because it's getting close to $1 million. It's quite a large, just to understand that it's not an ongoing thing rather than it's just finite within certain budgets, projects. So I mean, that's going to clarify all that, what Alistair was asking.
Right.
So I'm all good.
Yeah, we're right,
Yeah.
okay. Any other questions? Tanya, is there any more that you'd like to go through?
on the report, not on that page, Chair. Cash flow, page 15. I just want to draw councillors' attention to the seasonal nature of the cash flow, and in this situation, we've been using our own seasonal cash flow to fund our climate resilience projects to date. So we haven't gone and taken out large tranches of debt for two reasons, and one is we didn't need to, and we were hoping that the interest rates would go down before we committed to that. That hasn't happened, but at the same time, we're now in overdraft, in negative funds. And so we've been quite successful, and we've got through most of the year with very little interest cost. And our plan going forward is to continue to use our funds and monitor the debt and investment market to make sure that we're getting the best net cost. I'll go to page 17. It's got the outline, the dealers report. Now, I've spoken before about our work in this area and our part-time debt management officer.
Sorry, what was that name?
That's a question.
Oh, yeah.
Just when you finish, Tony.
Okay. So we're continuing to make progress in this debt management, getting the numbers of overdue debtors down, working through the process with them. Sometimes it's a legal process, sometimes it's an arrangement. So I simply wanted to take, just to highlight to you that continues. And that while there's a small blip here in the period of 90 days for March 2024, all that is in action. It's underway. The process is appropriate to recovering that money and speeding up the process. So without going into, I don't think there's anything else, cleaning your loans. I'll take questions, Chair.
Yeah, Lyndall?
Thanks. I now have two questions. Well, actually, yes, I'm puzzled by the 6-year limitation on recovery.
Statutory limitation.
It must make it difficult.
It makes it, so it's imperative that we actually have active processes and that the process is allowed to follow, that we work through it. So in rates debt, we have two options. Well, we have multiple options clearly, but for enforcement we have two options, and that is mortgagee, which is working very successfully for us. So that leaves us with ratepayers who don't have a mortgage, and that's a much more difficult process. And as I've mentioned to this council before, we've been unwilling over the past to initiate rate sales or even go close to initiating rate sales. I think 3 or 4 years ago, we introduced a debt management policy that suggested that we would start to do that, and that we would work where we can with other councils, which we are doing. We tend to find that if people are not paying rates, they're not paying the other council as well. And so we've been successful in working with other councils. Occasionally we come across a ratepayer who has paid the other council and hasn't paid us. Invariably, these are small amounts that have accumulated into larger amounts over time. It's always our preference to work with those people to try and make a payment arrangement before we go to that point. But we do have some that have passed the 6 years, as we've highlighted here, and we're working with all of those people to try and eliminate that situation.
Thanks. My second question is about the Clean Air Lines, and it comes up at strategy and policy as well. So I'm asking what, from your perspective, needs to happen next for that to perhaps cease. Strategy and policy decided that was the way.
CEO of Invercargill City Council was asked yesterday what his alternative was. I didn't hear his answer. I think he said we could work together. I'm not a policy person. I don't have a clear view of how we could, but I can see from these numbers and from talking to the officers at the other councils that this has not started off successfully, but the situation, the market, I suppose, has changed. The situation has changed. So this, I think, will come to an end. You can see there's very low numbers involved now. So yes, it's been agile, I think, in changing. I haven't got an answer, councillor, to the policy direction.
No, but from the, from your, an easy thing for us to conclude if the
To conclude, yes.
committee decided that. Thank you.
Mr. Alistair?
Yeah, my assumption is that when we're in the positive range, you're using short-term interest, aren't you?
Sorry, we're back at the cash
So
flow.
I'm going back to, to your debt forecast.
Page 15.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yep.
So the question was,
We're putting that money that's sitting there on deposit.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is why also with that amount of money and the interest rates, deposit rates we've achieved this year were very high. We were 6% multiple times. So yes, so we've got an increase in our budget as a result of that. The 12 months past this period, you'll see a different graph. You'll see it move down $10 million.
Right, thank you. Jeremy?
Just quick around that graph. Is that like it's forecast, but it's actuals, isn't it?
It's
Actuals up to.
it was forecast in March, but it was
Yeah.
actuals up to date. Yes.
Actuals. So that's where we're heading. Now I've got another couple of questions. I'm just going down here. In regards to major project expenditure, page 16, when you're looking at the proposed Southern Water Land Plan, oops, something's come up. When we're looking at the 17 million, I take it that's everything. I know someone mentioned, it's cost us 6 million, but I've always known it's cost a lot more than that. So everything gets thrown in there. I'm just predicting that those numbers will disappear as in once it's
Yes.
goes operative. We seem to be still spending quite a lot. I'd like to see at some stage is where the 1.59 million, I take it to be legal and things a lot of it, but I take it's within their own business.
Sorry, which numbers?
The 1.5 down the bottom million
Yes,
that's
yes.
been spent to date.
Yes, that's our internal cost for.
Yeah, it's internal costs and things, so.
Well, internal and external, we are
Yeah.
using a number of people to, of course, support the legal process.
Mm.
In terms of that bucket, proposed Southern Water Land Plan, that is effectively all money that we've internally allocated to water planning. So while we call it the plan, it's all the processes around having water plans, and the ultimate outcome, I suppose, is that we have a plan. But it's 14-year investment, which is significant. And without seeing other councils' numbers, I would suggest that it's not out of the way. I mean, other councils actually budget millions of dollars and capitalise it. They borrow the money to fund plans. We haven't done that for the reason that if it's not this plan, it's another one. And it is actually part of our business. It's writing plans. So, yeah.
So just looking into the future, obviously with the water and land plan.
This one,
Yeah,
yes.
this one, I suppose. I suppose it may be a variance to it, but technically, is it sort of, it's a bit like the People Water Land project. It's finished, technically. So I'm just sort of completion and then moving to the next.
Would you like to see?
I'm just saying, is it going to change into the future, I
Well,
suppose?
what we could do, councillor, is given that that plan has been adopted, we could actually, at the beginning of July, start recording the water spend towards the next one, because there is a transition, there's cost of transition and implementation.
Yeah, because that's your figure is just going to carry on going up and up and up and up, but it's everything is business as usual too. So we're just trying to. At some stage, you got to put a peg in the sand and say, well, we've got to that point now. Where do we go? I don't know. That's my opinion.
So perhaps just what I'm hearing is that you're saying that once the plan becomes fully operative in November, perhaps towards the end of this year, there's a closing date on that particular major project, and you expect that 12 months hence, you would perhaps see plan change to Atahi, replace this as the
Well,
next
it's almost the implementation of it.
continuation of it, or?
We've developed it, we've got it, and there's implementation. It's just a sort of a turning point, I would have thought. Because otherwise, we're just going to keep on, this figure's just going to keep on going up and up and up. At some stage, you've got to move on. I don't know, I'm just.
I think that comes from the point where the other night we were in a meeting and we got, we got more legal fees to come to get through this land development thing. And 60 or 100 grand was firstly put up. Where does it come from?
The money.
Where does the 100 grand come from? Because did we have it budgeted? How does it work?
Part of our total plan budget, GM4 strategy, well, policy in this case, has a budget for water implementation, and that will be including legal. Now, in our contractors and consultants, we do include law, our legal support. We haven't specifically pulled legal out as a cost. That's one of our consultants, because they largely are very important to the planning process. Effectively, they are part of the planning process. So yeah, they are budgeted for. Then we have budgeted, and we have to make adjustments in other parts.
Because we're going to have to get real tight on this going forward, aren't we?
All costs are councillor.
Right.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you. And just looking at my run sheet, we're getting towards the end of the time we've got allocated for this. Is there anything more? So that covers the clean air lines stuff as well. That's all okay. And then those other graphs show where we're at. Everybody looking for those? All right. So would somebody like to move that recommendation for the finances? It's Jeremy. Thank you, Jeremy. Seconder. Daniel. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. There it was there. Right, now we're up to the investment report.
And we were expecting JP Weir to be here in attendance. Are they here? They'll be soon. So can I suggest that we defer this item on the agenda till they arrive and move to item 3?
Right, I just move along to Rachel. That's on page 61, starts. Welcome, Rachel. Can you highlight anything in here, please, that you'd like to draw our attention to?
Morning, Coach Owen. I'm just actually waiting for Dave Gibbs to join us as well, but I'll lead off while we're waiting for Dave to come down to this end of the building. So as you can see, this is the performance report through to the end of the third quarter and attaches with the financial information also in the agenda. So we have a summary and the cover report for each of the 6 portfolios in the long-term plan about key activities that have occurred. And then you can see in the longer report where we are for specific performance measures and targets. So at the end of the third quarter, we had a high confidence in 37 of those targets being achieved, medium confidence in 16, and low in 1 of those targets by the end of the year. And there was a slight change in how we're reporting on the target relating to high value areas due to the changes in the government space around the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity. So very happy to take questions. I'm sure you will have picked up where we've got the lower levels of confidence, and it can explain further. The team can explain further if there's not in the report that you'd like to know about.
Right, thank you, Rachel. Is there, so the red docs, I suppose the ones we should look at, if you
So it's performance target 30.1 on page 107, which is actually one of the ones around sending out the council and committee meeting agendas. And so we had one that missed the statutory deadline, which was in relation to the extraordinary meeting of council on the long-term planning agenda. We didn't meet the deadline there, but other agendas have been.
Okay, there's some red ones that have gone to yellow. Equality engagement.
So a number of the targets around engagement are shown in the yellow in this space. And we have a piece of work currently being undertaken looking at those targets and the effectiveness of our engagement over the year that will be coming through to council by the end of the year.
Yeah. So we have heard through the submission process that people thought that, said they didn't hear about it. So that is obviously an issue that concerns some people in the community. That on page 77, we've got that 7.1. That's gone from red to yellow. That is something that obviously we need to consider all the time and make sure that we're doing what we can. One thing occurred to me was that it would be quite good to get some information on the actual publications that have been done, like in the newspapers or other methods, to just to lay that all out, exactly what information was provided, because I think that would be quite useful.
Yes, there's been a couple of publications during the course of year one on the pre-engagement, some of the work we tried to do before Christmas, but also the events that we attended over the summer period, the AMP shows by Mumu, etc. And so bringing that all together and articulating everything that we have done by way of engagement over the year and how effective from a variety of measures with the aim of that particular report we're going to bring through to you.
Okay, that would be good. Thank you. Alistair.
This might be but we've got to get our communications right. We did a lot, and I saw the list of what we did do, but it wasn't effective. So how do we change that to end up getting things effective and at least reach 50% of the population? I think I would like to see that we actually look at how we get that and make sure we get that penetration. Because when we go out there to these drop-in centres and we sit around and not do much, well, we might as well have been at home, or we could have been here helping you. But you get what I mean? We've just got to penetrate it better.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. So obviously there were learnings along the way which changed how we did things in the later phases of the LTP consultation and engagement, but we were also reaching out, obviously, looking at how things have been done, not only by other councils but other organisations, a whole set of learnings in there for us. So yeah, trying to take that all on board and tailor things from here.
Anything else? Questions on that report from Rachel? Okay, so we'll need a there.
I'm happy to move the recommendation, Chairman, if that's where we're at.
Rachel. Moved by Lyndall, seconded by Phil.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Right, now we have Tom and Bruce. Tom Potts and Bruce, we'll go back to your item now about the investment report.
Thank you. Who would you like us just here?
Oh, yes, that's.
Morning. Morning.
I'm Bruce.
What's that?
No, you sit there. We want to, people have to see you, so sit there.
Sit there?
Yeah.
You sure?
Yes.
The best looking one.
Don't have to look at yourself, just look away.
Right, well, thank you, gentlemen, for coming today, and please take us through your the performance and how we've done and what's going to happen in the future. We have about We've got a reasonable amount of time for this, up till effect in about 3/4 of an hour, so,
Excellent. Okay, so we'll take, I'm pretty sure I'll just get Tom to run through the portfolio performance, which is a very good performance for the 12 months. But before we go there, I thought I'd just highlight, it's been a really interesting 12 months, and not just in terms of economic, but in terms of what's been happening offshore from a geopolitical, from the elections in the US starting to build up momentum there. It's been a diverse 12 months of good things and bad things. But the overriding fact that we've had to address is interest rates staying higher because inflation has remained very, very sticky. And we'll come into a bit of an economic commentary about how we see what the next 12 to 18 months looks like. Because this afternoon we've got the NPS out, and that will actually give a pretty good guide of how the Reserve Bank is seeing things. And a few people are quite critical of the Reserve Bank. They've got a tough job. They've probably made it a little bit tougher over the last few years. But the result we bring today is actually a good outcome. So we'll start with the asset allocation and the performance, Tom.
Yeah, and I'll just, if any council have any questions, are you happy to take them as we go through? It's better that way. Is that all right, Chair?
yeah, we'll just make sure everybody's on the same page, so.
Okay, we're going to start on page 3.
That's page
So
3 of the
your-
report.
that's your report.
Oh, yes, so,
36 for us.
Here's our portfolio performance.
I was just going to make a quick comment that it's been an interesting 12 months. We've been saying that since 2020, basically.
Every year.
Since fellow called Trump's turned up on the doorstep, really. It's not going to look any different.
We've got a slide later on that we'll talk about where that fella comes back as well.
All right, cool.
What that may mean here.
If he's in
So
jail.
let's just have a look at the performance. So these figures are all to the end of March. So for the last 12 months, the portfolio has done 12.56% against a benchmark of 12.3. And over 5 years, which is a better time frame, the portfolio has done 41% versus benchmark 35. So nice outperformance of about 6% over the benchmark over that period. I would say that the fourth bullet point there is kind of a key one, that we have been actively managing risk within the portfolio. And if you flip over the page to the slide that says current portfolio positioning, you'll see that we're actually sitting on overweight defensive assets or cash and fixed interest at the moment. So we've got a weight in there of 56% as opposed to the benchmark of 50. And within our equities, so we've basically taken the tops off our shares towards the latter part of last year. We just thought things had run pretty hard and we wanted to lock in some of that gain that we've had. And whilst we're getting paid on cash sort of 5.5%, we're quite happy to sit on a little bit more cash, just recognising markets have run pretty hard. So, I'd say we're managing the portfolio to the SIPO, but currently we've got a slight bent towards being more in those defensive assets simply because we're getting paid to hold cash. So, Jeremy, if you think back to 2020, for example, the cash rate was at 0.25. So you weren't getting paid to sit in cash, but right now with a cash rate of 5.5%, given your tax position, we don't mind holding a bit more cash than we normally would.
Look forward to those days again for other reasons.
I'm sure you are, and all those of us with debt are the same. But I think it'll be some time away if we ever get there in actual fact. So, I guess the other thing we did there, that second bullet point, is we reduced what we call duration, and that was because we were conscious that we think interest rates are going to stay higher for longer. So we do think the Reserve Bank's going to cut interest rates in the latter part of this year. But when they do, this is not what you're going to want to hear, Jeremy, but we're not going back to 0.25. We're going to end up at sort of 3.5% for the OCR rate, which would imply, mortgage rates of, sort of 4s to 5s. And so, our intent actually now is to increase the fixed interest part of the portfolio because we think we're getting near the end of higher interest rates. So we're happy to lengthen the duration, to take advantage of some 5 and 6 year bonds paying us, say, 6%, because we think those interest rates are going to start to come down. So that with the extra cash we're sitting on at the moment, the intent of that is to be deployed into longer duration fixed interest. The chart there above just shows how the portfolio's gone since we've taken over, so it's up almost 70%. Is there any questions on anything relating to the portfolio positioning?
No, we'll make sure we're all looking at the same thing. So we're on your page.
So the page numbers are still on red.
We're on our page 5 at the moment.
Page 42.
Certainly, if you've got cash at the moment, I mean, yeah, if you're locking those interest rates, it sort of makes sense. Gives you pretty secure and takes volatility out of whatever Trump's going to do or Biden or whoever.
Yeah, and we're conscious that markets have had a pretty strong run over the past, really over the past three years, albeit with some volatility, in the mix, and just simply with cash rates high, we're happy to take a slightly more conservative approach than we, perhaps have over the past 12 months. So we're trying to manage the portfolio in a prudent manner, but, in accordance with the SIPO.
The portfolio guidelines that you have, that allows you to make those adjustments, and you're not being restricted by that overly.
No, we've got plenty of. So the SIPO, basically we can go to 40% growth assets, and we think that gives us enough flex, and particularly within cash we can go to 20%. And if something dramatic happened in the world, we would come to you and say, we need to change them, but we're more than comfortable that the current ranges, give us enough flex to make technical moves.
I'll just Tanya might want to come in on this one. If you had a lot more fixed sort of interest rates and more consistency, when we're doing budgets for long-term plans, could we actually input that information, taking the volatility out of our managed funds? Like we're only dealing with about 3%. The figure, I'm just saying you can lock in a better sort of potential return. Because we tend to be a bit conservative in our budgets.
Well, we discussed this yesterday. As we have with Scott Hamilton, who's been helping advise us, and we've taken the long-term fund view, which is 5.5% on this type of portfolio, and we've got 3% allocated to ratepayers and 2% for inflation to inflation-proof our reserves, because that's why we're holding reserves, and 0.5% is a cost in there. So while 12% is exceptionally good and the fund's going very well, we know equally well it could be -12, and it was only 18 months ago we went through a sort of a darker time, and we were going backwards for 10 months. So the strategic view is 5.5% long term.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, I would like to think we would do more than 5.5. So if you think about just the last 5 years here, which includes COVID and some bad times, 41%, so call that 8%. But I think to Tane's point, you're not always going to have good years. So by having a lower number, it means you can plan budget accordingly. So if you have 2 bad years in a row, for example, which is unlikely, but it can happen, you don't want to be eating into your capital too much.
Good balancing act, that's right. But I think that is the best approach to take, and we've seen it over portfolios for 28 years. I've been with JB 28 years, but you want to have that growth in the portfolio, because like we saw with the inflation, and this is why the Reserve Bank's got a real hard act, is that you do not want to see inflation stay up above 4%. So inflation's sitting at 4% at the moment, hopefully coming down a little bit more, but anything above that 3% is a real bugbear, and it just shows the cost of living. You want your portfolio to keep up with inflation over the long term, so you've got to have that growth aspect in there as well. So take a little bit of the volatility up with the bonds, but keep growing your portfolio over the long term. And at 5 years at simple 8% is a good outcome.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we might just move on to slide 6. Goldilocks and narrow leadership. If you're on the same
So, so we'll just have a bit of slides talking about the big sort of macro picture. Because it's important our viewers understand the macro picture because it's how it drives our actual portfolio construction for the portfolio. And when we talk about Goldilocks, so the world's been in this weird, not too hot, not too cold. It's just sort of been feeling about right for some time, particularly in the US, which is still sort of the driver of how global markets tend to behave. And that second bullet point there, so the US economy is on track for this magical soft landing, which is when a Reserve Bank can engineer a slowdown without putting an economy into a recession. Compare that to say what's happening here in New Zealand, where things seem to be slowing at a rapid rate, and it's going to lead us to a position where the RBNZ probably has to cut sooner than they were planning to, and probably out of whack with what the rest of the world's going to start doing. So it may well be that the RBNZ has to start cutting rates here, third quarter this year, or, there's an argument they could do them today. They won't, because, our economy is slowing more than the rest of the world. If you think about the US, is quite fortunate in that 85% of goods they manufacture, they actually manufacture and sell within the US, so they're not reliant on export to sort of boost their GDP, unlike us. So they're a very self-fulfilling economy. So I guess that next slide there, the one, so slide 7, is really just showing that there's what we call a few cracks. And I guess the key point there is that third bullet point. So it's the last mile is the hardest when central banks are trying to rein in inflation. So, we're trying to get it back down to the Reserve Bank band of 2 to 3%. The last inflation, it's coming down. In New Zealand was at 7.2. It's coming down, but some parts of that inflation are quite sticky, and trying to get it down. And this is a really key point for us because we still expect inflation to fall, and you've got things like wage growth, is coming down at the moment. Rents are finally starting to come down. So all these things are in theory disinflationary, which is what a Reserve Bank wants to see. But it's going to be a while to get it down from 7% down to that 2 to 3 mark.
And the market at the moment, the actual market pundits are really suggesting that we still have 2 or 3 cuts this year if you look at the pricing. But the reality is the Reserve Bank is really still saying March next year. Now, it doesn't really matter because the economy is going to fall. I'm a little bit more negative than Tom, but I expect the economy to really start to hit the stalls probably in the next 3 to 4 months. So the reality is if he doesn't come out because he's worried about the sticky inflation, the non-tradable side of the inflation coming through, council rates, insurances, and a few things that just cannot, be knocked out of bed. So he can't do that. So he's got to knock the rest of the economy more severe so that the non-tradables and you mix it together brings you back below the 3% band. But he may hold out best counter till November before he cuts rates. If he takes that long, it just means there's going to be bigger drops at the start of 2025. The final outcome will be the same. We'll be back down at an OCR rate, and the debate is whether it's going to 3.5%, i.e. 200 basis points, or whether it's going to be 100 basis points. My feeling is not the 3.5, it's probably the 4.5. But if things continue to deteriorate and he's too slow to turn the ship around, because if he leaves it too late, it's going to be harder to turn the ship around. Tom might be right. It might have to be 2 drops of 50 basis points. But the reality is it's going to come. We're going to get those lower rates. People look forward to lower rates, but that's because the economy is going to be so bad. And that wages thing is probably still going to be a bit sticky. You saw that net immigration starting to fade off from that 139,000 down to 111,000. I would say we're going to get less numbers coming into New Zealand. So while that might take a little bit of the pressure off the wage side, it also takes a bit of the pressure off the rent side. And that's what Tom's saying there. The rents for the first time are starting to ease up a little bit. Not enough, but that's going to be what he's going to wait, watch, and worry about. Because if he starts to move too soon with a cut and inflation triggers off again, which is exactly what the Fed's doing, Powell is adamant that he wants to see these inflation figures for 6 months continue to track down. If they wobble up again like they did in the US, then he's going to have higher for longer. It's exactly the same scenario here. The we're in a worse position. So by 25, we will see those rates cut. Severely.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just interested because that's a national perspective, right? A whole country perspective. So I'm just wondering if there's any indication of Southland being an anomaly within that wider economy, and what, how some of those things might impact Southland's economy specifically, that we need to be aware of, either good, bad, or ugly.
Yeah, I suppose I'm looking anecdotal here, but I gather the debt levels are probably not as severe in Southland. Okay, there might be some farming levels out there. Some farms are finding it pretty tough. But in Auckland, the debt levels are through the roof. My argument has always been it's not actually about the interest rate, which sounds totally bland. It's about the amount of debt people took on. So remember when we were buying houses or starting a business, we might have a mortgage of 150,000. It was 16% back in the 90s, 80s. Now people went out because interest rates were 2.2, 2.4, and they borrowed $3 or $4 million to buy a residential home. That's happened a lot in Auckland. So I think Auckland's going to get hit more severe than the likes of down here because you didn't have that amount of debt coming through. That's just anecdotal.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and there are signs even within South, and obviously the farm, we're one big farm here anyway, so the pressure of those debts, the interest rates are certainly affecting cash flows, and I know even in Gore, just a sign that people are advertising we need food. On the New World on the boards, if you can donate, solo mother with 3 kids can't pay the going into winter and things. So there's things that are popping up that are going, things are not getting any better. These are for even towns in Gore, which is probably quite a prosperous area. There's still people doing very, very quite extreme extremes of hardship.
Yeah,
So, that's affecting everybody. That's all coming.
There's almost that term. There's almost that term, Jeremy, that's coming out as survive to 25. Just let's get through 24 because it's that ugly. And I've just come back from the States and I saw Vancouver, Seattle, San Francisco. And all those problems that we've got here, you're seeing this major level of poverty at the bottom that just, they can't own a home, the rents are killing them. It's significant. I've never seen such a wide variance between the old saying of the haves and the have-nots. And that's what it feels like a little bit in New Zealand, is that we've got this big band in the middle that's trying to just keep their head above water. And it looks really tough because if you think what the government's going to do, they're going to have to cut costs. So they're getting hurt on that side. Employment, you can live with a few interest rates, but when you lose your job, then you've got real issues. So that's absolutely right throughout the country.
I've seen the more, even the dairy industry a year ago, it was, can we find workers? This year we're getting 100 people applying for jobs. Yeah. So it's just more people coming, realising where the work is. Of course, that naturally goes, oh, well, we'll just bring our, we'll be a bit, we don't have to pay as much. It's a business. So say, well, we're trying to get the right people for us most cost effective, and that just flows on. It's a different market within a year.
Yeah.
Amazing. The employment thing.
Some positive things for Southland with the weak dollar. It's obviously good for the export sector, which is Southland's one big exporter, and it's good for tourism in theory because it's a lot cheaper for foreigners to come here. So for the stance, I would have thought Southland should be better insulated than other parts of New Zealand, particularly the cities. And slow down.
Banks have changed their attitudes too, and they're being pretty tough.
Yeah.
Which adds another stress into the community.
I've heard different terms used, but yes, tough. I've heard that.
Yeah, well, I did look. I think we're hooked to the outside.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next then?
So just this slide, how worried should we be about a no landing scenario for the US? I guess this is your worst case scenario, is that the US economy keeps going strong as it is at the moment, and in fact they don't end up cutting rates because they can't get inflation under control. And so, markets tend to, so far, they've been looking at if it's bad economic data, equity markets have gone up on the basis that the markets look forward and they think the Reserve Bank's going to start cutting rates. So markets go up. Your worst case would be if the central bank doesn't cut interest rates, and they just keep them high in the US because you've got to get inflation under control. Like having inflation at 7% just doesn't work, because your rates will go up at more than 3%. You know, they'll be 10%, and so you know, we think central banks have to be committed to getting interest rates under control.
I suppose one thing we do want to highlight in regard to the portfolio and the position is that we come here and we talk a lot about macro, and absolutely it's our first go-to. But the real key to all our investment comes down to our models on earnings and the companies that we select. That's what really matters, because those companies get through whatever the part of the cycle we're at. The earnings is always going to be number one in the model. So when we look at the companies that we have in the portfolio, both onshore and offshore, we're trying to find those companies that can still grow despite interest rates being where they are, despite inflation, despite unemployment, all the other macro factors that are happening. It's about earnings. You know, and we never want to lose sight of that. So we have this debate with our in-house economist, who is, you know, possibly the number one or number two economist in the country. Fantastic. We love all the information, but we want to know about the companies that we have in our portfolio. And that's the key to getting outperformance in your portfolio for the medium to long term. You know, it's too hard. If you go back to a year ago or 2 years ago, the economists were all saying one thing, 6 months later they're saying something, the Reserve Bank was saying something. It's just too hard to jump around when you're doing investment. But if you stick to the companies, you look for those earnings, make sure they've got big, good, strong balance sheets. Yeah, you'll get them wrong a little bit in the short term. But those companies that are on the boards are sitting down looking at the same things that we're looking at, and the widgets are still being manufactured. You pick on the likes of a Microsoft. You know, Microsoft's still going to keep ticking along. Yes, the earnings they might slow down, but you're not going to pull your Microsoft out of your system. You're not going to turn your lights off at home. Those are the type of companies that we've got an annuity stream that we can see and we can measure out for the next 3, 5, 10 years. That's what wins your portfolio. So we just, you know, we talk about macro a lot, but the reality is it's earnings that we want in our portfolios. Sorry, Tom.
Can I ask the Chair, I'd like to ask a question of the agenda. In terms of the macro though, does it alter your tactical allocation? So we have a SIPO which says your band that you can work in, and last time you were here you talked about tactical allocation. Does these concerns that you're discussing with us, do they tilt that a little?
Yeah, you might have missed the intro at the start. We talked about at the moment we're technically overweight defensive assets because, you know, we're getting paid 5.5–6% to hold a bit of cash, and we're cognizant markets have had a big run, and so we're sitting on a bit more cash than we normally would. So it does, absolutely.
One of the questions, because a couple of questions we've had at recent board meetings, the board member said, but Bruce, Tom, aren't we looking at another 2,000? Aren't we looking at another .com? Because you just saw the Dow went through an all-time record in 128 years at 40,000 plus. This is very different than 2000. 2000 was about speculation. You had companies trading on multiples of 80 to 90 times. The companies today that are driving this market are trading on multiples around 30 times. Still expensive, but not ridiculous. Why are they so expensive? Well, 30 times is up there, but don't get the earnings have actually delivered. If you look at the companies, they've actually, earnings has supported the current valuations. So it hasn't got that speculative feel to it. So we look at that big approach, we drill down into the companies, we say, okay, where our asset allocation wants to be, and then we pick the right companies to get the right forward earnings going out. So that's really important. It's not 2000 again, in our view.
If we flick on to that slide, it's our slide 15. It's headed, can the leading stocks continue to lead? Sort of what Bruce was just talking about. So you've got this weird situation, if you like, in the US at the moment that that the largest 7 stocks are now 30% of the US market. And we hold a number of those within the portfolio. And you've also got these, so you've got AI is obviously huge for the world. And it's not just those stocks that are listed, it's also things like data centers, which we own in the portfolio. I know down here, I believe there's a big data centre going in somewhere. And the other thing is these GLP-1 drugs, these weight loss drugs, which is, you might have heard about. So there's a company called Novo Nordisk.
Why were you looking at Come on, you're focusing over that very.
Have a look around the table and decide who knows about those.
We're enjoying life.
So these companies now are massive and a change in the way potentially that healthcare is delivered, and so it's the market's sort of struggling to work out how to value these businesses because they've got new drugs that have got a wider use than what they originally intended for. So it's a matter of just how wide those drugs become.
Talking about those sorts of things, and we've still got about another 10 minutes or so, but companies that produce food, companies that produce things that really are necessary, I suppose all this tech stuff is necessary, but are they ones that feature as being profitable and being worth investing into the future, or are they a bit shaky and are people not investing in them, like Fonterra, for example?
So those companies are what we call consumer staples, consumer discretionary, that are really good long-term holdings.
Yeah.
Fonterra is a weird one because it's what you buy on the listed market is not what you buy when you go to the farm. So we don't actually own Fonterra listed shares because we don't like the structure. But boring food staples are a good part of the portfolio. We own quite a few of those boring companies. You can't just hold the Microsofts and the Nvidias. You've got to hold some boring stuff as well. So yeah, absolutely part of the portfolio.
I think you call it boring.
Okay, that's good to hear.
It's coming back to realism, isn't it? Something producing something, where in the past we've had all these high-flying things, made a lot of money but disappeared quick.
But this time, I know there's a famous words, this time it's different, but AI is real. There's going to be massive increases, we think, in productivity. Just the way corporates are looking at their in-house, they're going, actually, can we improve on what we're doing? And they've got the tools there to do it. We, as a company, looking at better ways that we can do things with technology. For an old guy, that's sometimes a wee bit of a challenge, but I know that I believe it does actually work. So, yeah, we're making the most of it.
Yeah. And just on that boring, but I don't use the word boring, but I think we've got all the power companies in the portfolio because they tend to put their rates up with inflation and a little bit extra, and people generally still pay their power. So we've got Contact, Meridian, Mercury in the portfolio. So we've got all the bases covered because those dull companies that make that boring widget people want, and they're inflation proofed as well, which we like. Just conscious of time, so we'll flick on to we'll look at slide 18, which is this greater focus on US politics, because everyone asks what's going to happen in the US, and look, we don't know. I don't think anyone knows. You do have an 81-year-old and a 78-year-old, which is maybe that's a democracy that's best. I don't know, but the top right-hand thing, the US election scenario, sort of shows. The important thing to remember here is that it's Congress in the US that determines things like tax cuts and spending. It's not the president. The president lets people out of jail and goes to meetings and doesn't actually have that much power in the US.
Stop it.
Comment, but
Maybe not be a Southland relevant reference.
so if you think about that little chart, it just shows obviously red and blue and how it may look, but we don't know. But history suggests that a mix. So if you have a red president and a blue Congress, it's actually okay for the economy and world peace and harmony, if you like. So it's got to be a coin toss. I think last time they went, there was 78 million sort of each. So half of America probably won't vote anyway, and the half that will vote has already made up their mind. So that change.
Interesting on the visit to the cities in the US, the first meeting, don't talk politics. Do not discuss politics. It was almost like in New Zealand, we can still have a little bit of a conversation without getting fired up about it. But over there, they said there is politics. So it's very divisive, very divisive.
So just on slide 20, which is that one headed stubborn inflation, that RBNZ rate cut. So we sort of talked about the RBNZ. You know, I think that the key good things for inflation here is that the labour market has in the last 6 months has changed completely. So to your point, Jeremy, a year ago you couldn't get anyone to work on the farm. Now you've got hundreds of people applying. So instead of paying $25 a labour unit, whatever it is, you know, it could be $22.50 or even less this year. So that really is
not happening.
No, minimum wage $23.50. So roughly.
My point was though that you know it's going to be, you don't need to pay up anymore. I think we're going to see a bit of normalisation. It's very inflationary wage increases.
Is that across the different sectors within employment though? You know, thinking about some of the highly qualified staff that we've got here, compared to entry level.
Yeah, differentiated.
Yeah.
100%. Certainly at the entry level market, there's now a lot more candidates for jobs than there would have been a year ago.
I think the thing the other day in New Zealand Herald, there's a spike of 96% in applicants for jobs. So 96%. Before, you didn't have enough applicants turning up. Now, and I think that's the worry that's coming through. I think there is a level of anxiety coming through now because interest rates were stressful enough, cost of living was stressful enough, but then throw on the likelihood you could lose your job. If you're thinking about Wellington at the moment, wow, you know, if you're a property owner in Wellington, wow, you'd be a wee bit worried because it's not people at the bottom who don't have a house, it's people who are middle management are being culled out. So this has really changed and there is a huge degree of anxiety out there about what the next 12 months looks like because there will be this clean out to get back to getting the numbers right because the government's got a real issue. They're going to have to cut back on some spending, although we can still get some tax cuts. But they're also going to have to try and balance the books. And if you think about what's going to happen on the revenue side of the books, the revenue's going to drop. So guess what? Tax rate's going to drop. So there's a whole lot of balancing items going on at the moment. Not easy.
Amy's got one.
Yeah, sorry, and it's not a question, actually, just sort of further to Lyndall's point, you know, given the nature of the work that we do and the size of the organisation, we have a lot of unique, specific technical roles that within the broader changes that are going on will be subject to their own labour market supply and demand, you know.
And we'll always come back to that.
Yeah, and then we have, you know, even if we can find the people, we have issues in Southland around availability of housing. So actually finding places for people to stay often tends to be a big obstacle for us as well in terms of attracting people into roles.
Just the housing thing comes back to that key thing, it's supply and demand. We just got to have more houses to bring the cost of them down. Just got to have more houses.
Right. Okay, how are things going? Still got a few minutes to go. If you want.
You have a question, Jeremy?
I was just going to say immigrants will pay $31 an hour on farms, on their immigrant visas. No, we're up to $31 an hour.
31.
And a lot of the Illuster and I are saying 60 to 70,000 is a sort of start wage on a farm.
See what's going to happen is,
I mean, when I was saying we pay well, but there was demand too.
that immigration trend, what I'm seeing now is dropping down. So all of a sudden, the labour mightn't be coming in droves to work here in New Zealand. So it takes the pressure off rents because there's not so many people looking for a house. But guess what? Your wage growth might not come off. It may actually keep climbing up. So it's a balancing act again. Immigration, I think immigration is going to drop right back.
And from the sorry?
Except in the health sector, sorry.
Yeah. So, you know, from a portfolio construct, that's why we've got 28% in offshore equities, because we're conscious that we're here in Southland, and so you want to get exposure to different sectors, different geographic regions, and so that's why we have a large part of the portfolio offshore. And the final thing to say about the New Zealand equity markets, not the New Zealand economy, because we've got sort of 40% of the gentailers. You've got companies like Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, which is 99% export. And so it's not, even if the New Zealand economy is slowing, which it is, the New Zealand equity market can actually still do quite well. So all is not lost for shares and therefore the investment portfolio. So yeah, that's pretty much up. There's the form, unless there's any sort of more questions from anyone.
Just one other point, just checking up. Just remember, we always talk about performance here, but it is about risk management, and that's what we don't leave on the table here. We don't walk away and go, oh, I came here and talk about performance. We want to let you know that we actually are managing the risk side of it, and that's what's more important than just performance, because performance can come and go. Risk management never goes. We've always got our feet on the ground about, are we managing the portfolio from a risk basis first? Is it well diversified? Have we got the right securities? Have we got the right balance? Are we looking at maybe we're wrong? What's the downside if we are wrong? All of those, and then we have the performance come out the other end of it. That's the key to the management of your monies.
Thank you. I was just about to ask that.
Sorry, Tanya.
Sorry, Chair. I was just about to ask about diversification and risk management, just to assure our members that the balanced portfolio is working and you have the tools to work it. And that the return of our money is more important than the return on our money. Both are equal, but the first one is the return of our money.
Jeremy?
That is important, because that's why we went down to a 50-50 scenario, and we've gone back to a 60-40. And that was always my concern, is if we don't want to be betting everything, so to speak, we've got to have a balanced risk. So some things we don't want to lose. Those reserves and bits and pieces that we're putting into the system.
Thanks, Chairman. Just a random question that I have to ask. And it goes without saying, I hope that any of the investments we're making are green and acceptable to. Yeah.
Yes, they are.
Thank you.
Buy some more Fonterra shares then. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, greenwash, you mean? Oh, sorry.
Hold on, please. Al, do you have a question?
Easy on the degrees, look at landfill.
We can't be investing in armaments and things, right?
I had a question about Australia. We've got a couple of slides on them at the end there.
Yep.
Are they anything to worry about there? They're pretty much the same as us, but on a bigger scale, I suppose.
Yeah, look, I think globally everyone's looking at what central banks do with interest rates, because they're such a driver of the underlying economy. So, frankly, it's the same in Australia. It's all about the RBA, Reserve Bank of Australia. Australia's lucky because they do mine their parts of their country, so they have another massive income stream to their economy. They're also a big agricultural country as well. But the Australian market we use for diversification, so we try to get exposure in that market for things we can't do here. So things like Woolworths, Wesfarmers, things like BHP, Rio, some of the big banks. So we use Australia to get access to parts of the market that we don't have here in New Zealand. So it's really all about what the central bank does with interest rates.
Okay. Oh, well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming in and explaining all of that. There's certainly a lot of information there, a lot of good bedtime reading. So it's all very interesting. Yeah.
And again, thank you for the trust that you put in us to manage your monies, because this is a relationship we value, and we're always happy to jump on a plane and come down at any time, not just on these occasions, but if something comes up, we'll pick up the phone and ring us, because that's what we're looking at all the time.
Great, thanks. I'm happy to move, Chairman.
Thank you. Well, second, we need to go back to the report. And so that's back on page 28. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you shortly.
Vehicle submissions.
Thank you.
Yeah, I won. Yeah, and it is.
Here we go.
Is Tracy coming in, or is you just?
Tracy's going to take a general copy. and go over the investment report.
10 or 15.
So,
Stage.
just to order everybody, we're back to page 28 now. Just to go through the,
Thank you, and apologies, I put the first item over a little longer, and I took in a phone call from Wellington, so. So Chair, the investment report to March 31st, I will take as read. I did copy in there some notes from the US company Bancorp into the summary, just pointing out that we have, as our gentleman said, have seen a substantial increase in the market internationally from November. The S&P, which is the 500 top companies in the US, hitting a record post 31st of March. And then reversing and then going, charging ahead again. So very encouraging when we look at the numbers as to what's in our portfolio, but always been aware that the numbers can reverse, is what I'm saying. At the 31st of March, we had, if we look at page 29, we had $8.9 million invested ourselves in the bank and local deposits, earning what has been quite a high interest rate, as we've already discussed, and 31.2 million in the portfolio. And you can see there the percentage holdings in the very detailed report that JB Ware have provided us as to their allocation. And page 30 talks about the benchmarks. And again, much more detail provided in the 5-year results, and you'll see later we have a report, and even greater detail actually as to the performance of the portfolio. In summary, I suggest that the portfolio increased 4.8% during the quarter, and over the 12 months has gained 12.6% against a benchmark of 12.3%. Implying outperformance, which is a technical word for better than. But I just come back to our strategic allocation of investment income, which is 5.5%. That is the long-term average across a period of time that councils are advised to work towards for this type of balanced portfolio. So that is the report, Chair. If there's any questions.
thank you. So I think we've had a pretty good discussion about, but was there anything in particular on this in terms of the performance of our portfolio there on that chart?
No, I just reiterate what I've said with the gentleman here, that it's very, very important, the management of our portfolio, the balance of it. We've got good advice on that. It's worked well to date. Even with the balanced portfolio, there are movements, but the movements are muted relative to if we had 100% in one or the other. So that's the purpose of a balanced portfolio, and it's doing its job, I suppose is what I'm saying, is it's providing a return greater than the bank on average. It was only 18 months ago, a bank return was 1%. So we can't always be in term deposits, but we will be when it's beneficial.
Jeremy?
I was just saying, do you know what we are as of today? Well, you were at the end of April, but just wondering.
31, went down.
So we haven't gone, yeah, but we're still, we're 31.2. Are you saying we're still around 31
Yes.
now?
So April saw a decline, May has seen an increase. That, I think the graph on page 31 says it all. The red being the change in the value and the blue being the income.
Yeah, I was just wondering what the last
Every
two
month
months.
we earn a degree of income into the portfolio, as Bruce said, from the companies. They pay dividends and we get interest on the bonds. So we are always earning an income. But the movement in the portfolio can be very volatile. Long term, the aim is upwards, but in the short term, it can be in any direction.
I think that's something that we've always had, committee members have over the years. So we've really got to look at that blue bar, don't we? That's the money that we can actually use.
So that is the money that we budget on in our accounts for the subsidy of rates.
We can use, if we draw down, we do. We can draw down from the managed funds, not just the blue, so. We have done that and
But we don't want to do that, do we? Because that,
that's
that
your
reduces.
reserves. There's a lot of your reserves there, so that's the money we're talking.
Well,
I'm just putting
We-
that, it's the,
If we use the reserves, where would they come from? They come out of that 12%?
The reserves come out of the portfolio as a whole.
31.2.
Yeah. So they would come out of that.
We have drawn down on the portfolio to balance sheet our liquidity. And it was appropriate to do that when we had a $10 million overdraft. So as council, as part of the financial strategy, we determine what reserves are used as in line with the reserves policy.
If we can suggest, in the past, we've had over the years, when we've seen those drawdowns, you pointed out, be quite good for like you're not new, you've been here for 18 months.
Yeah.
But I mean, just, it was quite good where it's been going up, then we've drawn down, then it's keep building up over a number of years. Quite good just to refresh us on that.
All right, thank you. So I've got a recommendation on page 28 that we receive the report. Bill, second that, move that, and seconded by Lyndall. Those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Thank you very much, Talia, for all of that. Now we move on to something even more exciting, the vehicle report.
It's topical at least, Chair.
We're going to talk about colour of the car.
No, we are not.
Yeah, we dictate, Chair.
Yes,
But
yes.
I like, as I drive on my nice white,
Yeah.
not a wrong white.
No.
Right.
Got white and dirt.
We are page 111.
11. Right, welcome, Paul, and
Good morning, all.
You're, as Nicole said yesterday, the floor is yours.
Good morning, all, and thank you very much for your time this morning. I take the report as read. I've just got a few bits and pieces I'd just like to comment on and add some context to. Last financial year, we sought approval for 11 fleet vehicles to be replaced. We have now subsequently completed that full replacement. We got approval from the executive to replace all 11 and then to dispose of one additional vehicle. Currently our fleet is at 49 vehicles, made up of a combination of utilities and SUVs plus one passenger vehicle. The fleet management team continues to work on trying to right-size our fleet as much as possible. So we're using all the information from our information data system to inform us on some of those decisions as to how we manage our fleet going forward. It is important to note that we are starting to see some better utilization of our fleet going forward. So compared to the previous financial year, we have seen an increase in utilization of the vehicles, both for normal utilization plus on the off-road environment, so using them off-road. Last year we made a decision, and this was approved by executive, to use all of government funding to help us assist us with funding our vehicles, in the sense that they've got preferential pricing across quite a few models of vehicles. Decided to go that route because there was cost saving for us. So in total, about $16,000 that we saved on the total purchase price of all those vehicles. And also that we had come to the end of our, the useful, so the Mazda BT50s are no longer being supported and are no longer in production. So it gave us an opportunity to look further at other vehicles and so on. So we chose to go the all of government, which ended up giving us that additional saving at the same time. All of government is all in, so that means we need to, for that annual year or that financial year, we need to replace all our vehicles of our, all our replacements need to come from that all of government funds. We can't pick and choose from different customers. They give us a list, we choose the vehicles we want to go for, and they then give us that cost saving in the pricing. Not all manufacturers are on that list. There is a selected group of manufacturers on that list, but all those vehicles that we had the choice or to choose from met all of our requirements from a safety perspective and costing and so on. So today I'm asking if we could please get approval to go forward and replace up to 8 vehicles. We do have 24 vehicles on our current fleet that require replacing. That is that they meet the requirements in our policy from a replacement perspective. Obviously conscious that that's quite a large number, but today seeking approval for up to 8. The next step is we will then take a recommendation to the executive as to which vehicles we will replace and how many of each, whether it's a utility or SUV, and if there's any further reduction we can make to the fleet itself. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Paul. Alistair.
Paul, what was the difference between what you purchased your 12 vehicles for and you sold the old ones? How much did it cost you?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't actually have that at hand. So all of our vehicles that we sell go straight to Turners. We do them at current prices on the day. We set a reserve price for them. And if we don't meet that reserve, it comes back to us and then we get to make a decision as to whether we're going to go beyond the reserve or not.
I understand that, but the important thing for us to know is how much it's costing us, because you're getting a discount, I read, of $16,000 over 12 vehicles, am I right? Or is that
11.
per vehicle?
No, that's over the 11 vehicles.
Yeah. And then you're selling them out on the open market.
Mm-hmm.
And really, for us, the difference is all it's costing us, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I would like to know that, because when I look in your chart very quickly, that a lot of these vehicles haven't got very high mileage on them.
No, no.
My old Camry's got 354. And I think the biggest one I saw here was 140 something.
Yeah.
Will they go longer? I don't.
A policy.
So yeah, so the policy looks to, I think there's 4 points that we talked to, and I can't just find
I'll go straight to them, yeah.
Yeah, and we're looking at balancing those objectives, councillor. So it's not just the age that we're looking at when we are looking at changing our vehicles. If they have low mileage, we would often swap them out internally to a team that's perhaps doing more miles. That enables us to keep the vehicles in the fleet so long as it's safe to do so. So we're not just arbitrarily replacing vehicles because they're coming up. We're balancing all the different objectives within the policy.
I hear that, but also at the moment things are very tight, aren't they? And we've just gone through a heap of submissions telling us that we've got too many staff, too many vehicles, and also nobody can afford to pay the rates. So how do we look at making that more palatable to our constituents? And then we need to know what's going on. Policy's fine, but under different circumstances, we may just have to keep them longer.
And we we do endeavour to.
We do need to comply with the policy, because that's what guides us. If there's a policy needs to be reviewed, then there is a time for that.
Well, maybe it's that time.
Okay. Jeremy's got a question.
Just a wee bit on to clarify, even for us, there is a policy, but one of the things I'm always looking at, and I'm looking at the last 5 years, It's actually quite good information in regards to going from 57 down to 49, because we do, some of us have gone over this a few times. And, but also that you've got a ratio, I was trying to find where you've got the ratio staff per vehicle. And I would say that ratio is below three 5 years ago. Now you're 3.8. So it's indicating that we do employ more people, but we're actually utilising the vehicles a lot better. So I'm comfortable. The other thing is we will be putting depreciation, I take it, Tanya, of those vehicles, and the depreciation fund pays for the, so whether there's any gains, that goes back into that system anyway. I was just wondering if the depreciation it will certainly be covering the cost of replacement.
Absolutely. And I have
Yeah.
asked the staff if they're looking at the emails, if they know what the sales price was, because we have obviously we budget on the different.
Right. Lyndall?
Thanks, Chairman. I would, in my mind, the fact that we're only being asked to replace up to 8 instead of the 24 that need replacing, that fit the policy, would be an indication that we're trying to cut costs. So that's how I interpret that, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's a realistic view on the replacement. You know, and it's something that, you know, we are constantly grappling with to try and, you know, get that even balance, and as Amy pointed out, even swapping vehicles internally to try and you know, add more mileage to that vehicle as such, pass it on to divisions using them, you know, more frequently and driving longer distances. So yeah.
Jeremy, did you have a question?
Actually, just in regards to that, I was just looking, obviously anything over 4 years, so the reality in this policy should be doing 25% or 25% a year, which is your 10, which is more appropriate. You know, you can get into that regime, and then that's what consistent figures. I do hear Alice's comments. Everything needs to be looked at, and costs and things. So it is legitimate, but I do believe we've gone over this a few times too. Don't worry, Alistair, we have had a few interesting discussions about vehicles over the
We're
years.
going to get another one.
I know, we're getting another one. But
Amy has got a
Yeah,
comment.
and I was just going to say, look, it is something that we do keep constantly under review. We're very conscious about the commentary in the public, which, you know, predated this week. Is, you know, it's, and to Jeremy's point, you know, there's always conversations at this committee about it. We're mindful of that. We're also balancing that against the health and safety considerations about making sure that we have vehicles that are fit for purpose. Our staff have to cover the entire region. We do a lot of field work. And so, you know, that's an important consideration for us as well in the management of our fleet. It's one of our highest risk activities, as you'll know from the Health and Safety Report, that the Risk Insurance Committee gets.
the other thing is transparency. We never used to get this information. Only the last few years, we're actually seeing all the vehicles, understanding what's going on. So for the public, for our community, they can see the numbers there. There's nothing hidden. So that's, whether they like it or not, but that's, at least they see it. So.
And, you know, just further to Amy's point is that the older the vehicle becomes, so the emission ratings in some of those vehicles start deteriorating. You know, obviously running a newer, more efficient fleet is always, you know, helps us reaching that target, our emission targets.
Paul, give me an indication, please, of what the R&M cost of running this fleet is.
So you might have to give me the RMN.
Oh, repairs and maintenance.
Yep, I don't have those figures on at my fingertips right now. But, you know, obviously we are running to the schedule, and the schedule is according to the manufacturer of the vehicle. So particularly for our newer vehicles, our vehicles are scheduled in into the
Understand
into
that.
the, into you know,
But
into
the
service.
extraordinary stuff like a new motor, gearbox, all that sort of crap, stuff, sorry.
Yeah, I don't have that figure at hand.
Because where I'm coming from, these things are running well, I believe. And especially when you look at the kilometres that are sitting on them, we haven't got the age of them listed. I'll finish then. Oh, yes, we do.
Yeah,
need
ages,
to-
sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ages.
Everything's there, that's what I mean, it's very
Yeah, sorry,
transparent.
I missed that.
Well, can I ask, we have got some hybrid vehicles there, and I want to know what the opportunity is for expanding the number of hybrids or even EVs that might be useful for us. I understand that a lot of these vehicles have to carry heavy loads and go over rough ground and that sort of thing, so that's why you need a ute, but are there opportunities to electrify the fleet even more?
Yeah, so that goes into our consideration when we ask for the final numbers through the executive. So we'll make a recommendation on the replacement numbers of. So we might look at replacing a utility with a SUV like we did at our, not this last round, but the previous round, we actually replaced a utility with a SUV. So yeah, that's all part of the recommendation we make to the executive about which vehicles we'll replace and with what.
Thanks.
So, we always look at that as being a option.
Because we've got this goal to get to carbon neutral by 2050, so that's all part of our strategy, yes.
And I was just going to say, and to Paul's point, like we've got this list of 24, we get the approval to change a certain number of vehicles, and then we have a look at which vehicles those are. So some vehicles, because of where they're coming from, which teams they're coming from, and what we need to use those vehicles for, to your point, Chair, need to be the utes, but we're conscious that the market is changing as well. We're now starting to see those sorts of vehicles, those heavier vehicles being electrified or more hybrid options coming, which certainly, wasn't the case historically. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, we've got a recommendation on page 111, which has got 2 points to it. So we note the outcome of the report and of the program, and then we approve the purchase of up to 8 vehicles.
I'll move that.
Thank you, Lyndall. Seconder. Jeremy. Jeremy, thank you very much. And all those in favour, please say aye.
Hey, did you hear the against?
Oh, did you say against? No, I didn't.
Yes,
Right.
and
Can you
please note it
you
down.
want that recorded?
Yes, please.
One against, that's Alistair.
You're against that, are you?
Sorry.
I'm against it, yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, thank you very much, Paul. That's
Thank you for your time.
very good. Yeah, thank you. Right, Regional Software Holdings Limited. Going quite well to time. So plenty of time still to discuss these items fully. Thank you, Nadia and Tracy.
Chair, we're presenting the statement of intent as it says for RSHL and the half-year report to 31st of December. I'd like Tracy to draw your attention to the highlights in this report.
Good morning. So yeah, take the report as read. So just in this summary, the RSHL has the council's got a proposed total share of 660 towards the funding for the next financial year. This is just a draft statement of intent. So RSHL will, the final one will be just prior to end of June. So perhaps the main highlights in the statement of intent is RSHL's primary focus and objective, which is to complete the design and the build of the RS Next Gen and commence the first implementations. Just if we go into the financials, page 1.7. You'll note that for the 2024-2025 statement of intent, the proposed forecast deficit would be 823K. This is
Sorry, Tanya, what page are we on now?
147.
47.
147.
So at the bottom of the page was the surplus deficit after tax. Statement of intent 2024-2025 is 823,000. So RSHL, this is in line with expectations because it operates on a cost recovery basis and it's unlikely to operate at a profit. So it's just to highlight that. And in the little table on page 118, the top table shows the funding contribution of those councils and participating councils and government entities towards each of the programs. So environmental health and share is 664,000. You'll see towards ours next year, we'll be contributing about 356,000. And then the bottom table just shows just the project funding comparison for the different programs, RS, Next Gen, and central government, and just all the percentages. So the income funding from central government's increased by 800.
Thank you, Tracy. All councillors, I'd like to summarise very good analysis work that Tracy's done. RSHL has transformed itself over the last 2 years from being 100% of a software company to now a company that is corporate, represented by more councillors, that undertakes a lot of sector good work that was previously done through another structure called RECOCO, Regional Collaborative Councils. So RSHL, as it says in the item, has now completed that transformation. It has these large strands, or PO, as Wilma, our CEO, would call them, technology, and then delivering other sector programs on behalf of all of the councils, employing the staff to do that. It's a very, very worthwhile and beneficial company for us to be involved with to gain that, all the benefits that come from collaboration within the industry. The primary strands here of investment in technology allow us to have investments in that area that we could not fund ourselves. The software development has taken years. It's been a market leader. It's something well above what ES could do. The information, when you read the financials, can be a little misleading. As Tracy points out, they have negatives. We have a deficit. What's happening in part of those is the running down of the current software asset, Iris, which is 10 years old. It's depreciating down to zero, and the depreciation is technically it's an expense, but it's not a cash flow. So the cash flows of the organisation are sound. The accounting, you will see, has some brackets around it and the different strands. So we've been through and had a look at the balance sheet. We're happy with the budget. We're happy with the allocation. Our CE is a director of this company, which is also very important and beneficial to this council.
So you're not worried then about the 800K and the 600K.
No fear. It's an accounting depreciation of a past asset as it runs down to zero.
So the organisation is quite sustainable into the future.
Yes. It's largely self-funded, as Tracy said, through all of us paying a share, and we're in the not quite at the bottom. We're the second tier from the bottom of small council. Those larger councils are paying substantially more as a percentage. So us and Taranaki is second from the bottom of the list. I think after that, West Coast.
I see there on that table on the bottom of page 118, there's a row with central government funding on it, and projected to go from 139 to 1.2 million. Is that realistic under the current environment?
I can't answer the question as to the project. Do you know what the project is? No, sorry, can't tell you, but I'm sure that it would be.
Yeah, I can speak to Mark, but not particularly about that, but about just the draft, and just restated this is draft, you know, it's not the final statement of intent yet.
So would it be a worry if the government said, look, we can't put all that money into it, in fact, we're not going to give you anything? Would that be a...
Well, we'd hope that it's tied to work that can be circled, cut out. We can check, Chair, what the project is. I see it's a 1-year project.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I was just going to say the government funding is typically tied to programs of work, and either RSHL manages the work or acts as the banker. Being done. I can't speak to the specific program, but we can find that out and come back to you. Yeah.
Jeremy and Alison, did you have something you wanted to ask? So we want to be all part of the conversation.
Yes, sorry, I was gonna, you asked me or two.
Yes.
Okay. I just, you were clarifying that central government funding. I was just saying that there's a whole lot so they thrown a bit of money towards it, but no, it's actually a project that you were clarifying.
Yes, it's a project and it's under the sector funding, so it could be anything from investigation of science work to things. We're not sure. We can report back.
Yeah, and that's for the next year. So the reality is anything could happen the way this government's working too. So.
We're going to report back.
Is there anything else on the
No, we're happy with.
Thank you. Any other questions, Al?
$13.55 a ratepayer.
That's what it's costing us.
Are we getting the
To be in RSHL.
Correct.
Absolutely.
How can you convince me?
How can I convince you?
No, don't. It's all right.
That might be difficult.
Yeah, thanks. It's okay.
Thank you, Al. It is a good question. People want to know we are getting value from this organisation.
So one of the premises that sit behind, and Tanya did mention it, the inception of this organisation was to build a regulatory piece of software that regional councils use, and because that's a shared service, it enables us to access that software and the abilities and the benefits that software gets us at a rate far cheaper than we would ever be able to afford to purchase on our own. And the same is true of the next generation software as well. In fact, when it was first set up, there were 6 shareholding councils that were part of the RSHL and the IRIS development, and that's now increased. I want to say 9, but it might be 11 actually, I think. I can get the right number for you. So that's the first thing. And as the organisation is transitioning, the chief executives, who on behalf of the regional sector, Te Ora Kahika, are working with RSHL to scope the potential for the organisation to deliver more services regionally. And again, similar story, reducing the burden on individual councils to actually either having to fund or do work themselves, and to have more of a collaborative effort. So there's sort of the short-term actuals around the benefit from the IRIS work. There's the current co-delivery of projects that RSHL are doing, and then there's the opportunity in the future as the organisation transitions to, support us in that way as well.
Lyndall?
Yeah, and the easiest way for me to explain it to myself is that it's a shared service. It's a really, really good example of a whole lot of councils working together so that we're not duplicating, product or work.
You've got to turn around and ask, are you getting value? Because there's 664,000 going in, and there's $13.55 for each ratepayer. And that's out of your house too, my house.
I quite understand that, Councillor.
Thank you. Right. now we've got a recommendation there to receive the report. We don't have to do any action other than that. So would somebody like to move it, Jeremy? And seconder, Phil? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, and thanks very much, Tracy and Tony again. Right, we're now up to the information management update. Starts on page 195.
Firstly, I'd like to take the report as read. I do have a couple of matters to highlight in the report. Firstly, in particular, an acknowledgement to my IM team around the legacy database of things and the migration of that data into our current EDRMS objective. So in total, there's about an approximate 36,000 data objects that have been migrated over into objective. What I can say about this is it highlights the IM team's skills and capability to actually do this in-house. It's quite a big project. It actually helps to actually bring our compliance to searchability with Public Records Act and traceability of our physical records. We're currently in a test phase with the consents team around the access to those physical records. Definitely just in test because we need to actually understand whether what we're proposing to those teams is going to slow down the consents process. And if it does, we need to look at a different process for them to access those physical records. Limiting the access to the physical records is actually also protecting the physical records for the future. As they're not fully digitised yet, we actually have to make sure that we actually maintain the physical appearance of those physical records so that they don't get damaged for the future. So that's a great highlight for my team. I actually really wanted to mention them in this report. The other two highlights is our digitisation project is finally, our pilot project is finally coming to a close. We're very close to having the images ready in our production system for teams to actually access those scanned images. Following that, our next steps is to really review that pilot project and decide whether there's value in us actually continuing digitisation at the moment, considering the cost. And we'd definitely report on that following the review. And one more highlight is our agenda minutes software, Doc Assembler. We're actually rolling that out very gently and softly. So we're going to actually go live with our 2 June committees. At the moment, we've actually had our administrators trained and our report writers trained. We have 2 committees live and we have our report writers actually putting their reports into that system, and we'll be compiling our first agendas for those June committees fairly shortly. At the moment, it's going quite well. Any questions?
Thank you, Paula. Yes, are there any questions on that report? Lyndall?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a logistical thing from my own brain. The physical records, even when they are all digitised, do we have to keep them? And if so, how long do we have to keep them for?
Okay, so there's 2 elements to that. If we digitise and we digitise appropriately and we can prove to Archives New Zealand that we have digitised to their standard, we can then actually look at disposal of physical record. Yeah. If we don't, we have to actually hold on to them.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And well done.
No numbers.
A question, Paula, which may be a little bit tangential to this, is about the website and how easy it is to use for people and get information from it. I use it a bit, and I have to say sometimes I get a little bit lost. That might be me, but we've had 1 or 2 comments through the annual plan process about people not being able to find stuff on there. So is that a problem? Is it just a user problem, or is it something about the website that could be improved?
I'm happy to take that.
And I don't mind contributing if you want to. Yeah.
Yeah, look, because I would say it probably doesn't sit in Paula's doesn't sit entirely in Paula's realm. So it's a bit of a joint effort, that one. So one is, yeah, there is more information that we we can and should be making available to the public, and the website's a perfect place to be able to do that. The actual user interface probably requires input from the communications team. And also, you know, we needed to bring a customer lens on that. So we're having a customer strategy developed for the organisation at the moment, which will lead to an implementation plan that will look at a number of those things. And then we need to be, I think, working jointly as a cross-organisational team, you know, with lots of different views involved in that one in order to develop the website to its full effectiveness, not just for us, but also for the people that want to use the website as well.
That's probably what I can add to that around the digitisation of the physical record. Once that's digitised, and while we're doing the digitisation, we look at what we should actually, or what we could make public. So there's certain records that will be publicly accessible within our system and certain records that won't be. So when we do that digitisation, we actually analyse that. So it's actually within our system, once we actually have a website that's capable, we'd be able to say, okay, this can now actually be publicly accessed and these are now available for you to actually access.
Yeah. Things like the LiDAR, for example, which I mentioned in the past. Now, it is great. It's a wonderful resource, but sometimes I'm not sure how many people would, you know, be able to find it. If you type into Google, you know, Southland Regional Council LiDAR, you probably could find it that way. But using a search engine on the website itself might be so that people could find stuff easily. Maybe just a problem that I have, but probably not.
Oh, no, and I think you're right. We we do know and understand this, and this is feedback that we have had about the website, and it is a work on for us. And, you know, an added part of that is not just about making information and data available, but also making it consumable. So how do we make it available in a way that's understandable, utilisable, searchable, all those things.
Thank you, and thanks Paula and Amy for all of that. Any questions, anybody else? No? Okay, thank you Paula. Well, we've got the recommendation that we receive the information management update report, Jeremy, and seconded by Alistair. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Right, well, there, you might be able to tell us more about the technical stuff.
So Jane Carroll's on holiday today.
Yes,
Well, and
yes,
actually,
I'm not
just
Jane.
not just
Really?
today, but she's got a nice long holiday overseas. We've got Bert and Jeff here today from the IT team to talk through the information systems technology update.
Morning all. Just accepting this is as read. So the main parts for us as we're working through this is the decommissioning of servers. We're now getting into the crunch area of some more technically involved servers. So they've been left to last. So we've got the easier ones out of the way. So we're expecting we should be on target for those in the next quarter, but we'll just see how we go as we wade into that. So that's why it's still amber. There's still some minor technical glitches with the technology for the meeting room and the chambers. So it's down as green. So we just need to get a couple of those sorted. And we'll be liaising with users for that. So we should have a solution for that also.
And the other thing I would say probably about the RED report there on page 200 about the INFDP program that was officially cancelled. It's been cancelled, so there'll be no further reporting on that. Yeah. And Bert, could you just comment on we've also got a read on page 201 about the digital workplace in terms of the remaining devices for rolling out and converting the laptops to Windows 11?
Yes, so we've got an overall project to get the whole organisation up to Windows 11. There's some added benefits when we do that with regards to staff that need to work remotely. Availability of files becomes easier. It's less fidgety than what we currently have. So we are replacing laptops that are up for lease, and we've also got a program in place to replace those that are still Windows 10. We think we can do it in the next financial year. The schedule, it looks like we might be ahead of that, so we could be halfway through that.
It's always a good time to ask if the council has been behaving. I'm just looking at cyber security. Where it looks like it's not too bad.
Passed her test.
Yeah, we're stepping up that testing as well. So that's for the whole organisation. We're getting some of the finer points right in the background so that the reporting is better. At the moment, it's reporting that it's false positives. So people who are not clicking it and deleting it, Microsoft in the background is checking it, which means then it reports it as being read, but it's not actually read. So we've got a solution for that. So when the reporting is really good, we'll start releasing it for the organisation. But with regards to the councillors, yes, we are good for that.
Somewhat miraculous.
And just further to that, the cyber security, we have a handful of things in place that protect the organisation. So it's not just at one level, we're doing it at multiple levels. So I believe there's a committee meeting in June, which we can go a wee bit more in depth on that. Those were my main points that I had to discuss. Were there any questions?
So not a question, just a on the patching. Really nice to see from red to amber to green. It's an achievement. Thanks.
It's been a work in progress, that's for sure.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
it's good. It's good that it's green.
One thing I talked to Lyndall about yesterday, and may or may not be a problem, but we get the Objective Connect notifications for meetings like this and other things, and we often get them repeated with an update. So we get the original one, and then another one comes through, and it's the whole thing, but it's going to be changed to it. What my problem is that when I get it at first, I've got time, I download it and I have it as a PDF, and I can make comments on that, and so that when I come to a meeting I can click on all my pages that are marked and everything. And if I get an update sort of, later on, I have to go, I either ignore it or go through the whole process again, I think. So I'm not sure if that can be solved or whether it's just me.
Probably not you.
Yeah, it's probably not, that's probably through information management, the information management team, but I've picked up this query and I will address with Paula.
Have more than the point I was going to ask, have there been changes, or is it the glitch that we seem to be getting bang, bang 2 or 3 times the same?
Yeah,
thing loaded up?
I'd need to look in the background and find out what's happening for you to know that.
Are other people getting that?
Yeah,
or is it just me?
Yeah, that's what I was.
All right. Is there anything else? Any other questions?
Can I just inquire the Iris Next Gen project? I see the go live date being set. Is it going to be a significant step up or improvement, or what is that? Should that be something we get excited about, or?
I think it's something to be excited about. From our IT's perspective, the Next Gen is going to be hosted in the cloud and looked after by Datacom. So then that relieves the pressure server-wise for what we're storing here and housing here. It'll also help us with regards to they will handle the patching and the upgrades and all the things that we are currently doing for it.
And so that's something that all the other participants in the regional space are going to benefit from as well.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Amy?
Sorry, to your point, councillor, I think whilst Iris Next Gen is an IT platform, actually it's there to deliver a business solution. So whilst great to hear that there's benefit for the IT team as well. In fact, actually, it's an enormous benefit to the users. It's compared to current Iris, which, you know, as was mentioned before, is getting on for 10 years old now, and you know, has some challenges. I think actually the usability, ease of use, having a modern platform makes it so much easier, and the benefits that it brings to our staff and efficiencies is, yeah, absolutely.
You'd expect there'll be some productivity gains for us?
Entirely. Well, I mean, we know at the moment that the current Iris, we have challenges with field capture, and this is so much more streamlined now, for example.
Yeah, just to follow that, how are we going to track those improvements? Are we going to be able to?
Good question.
You know, show some of those benefits over time.
It's been pretty well scoped, and you might know if you've been closer to it.
Yeah, we've got metrics of current timings for various tasks that are within Iris. So
we'll be able to do a 6-monthly check-in. Yeah, cool.
And
look forward to seeing that then.
At this stage, I'm not across the whole project. Jane would be able to answer that better for you.
No, and I don't have the details either, but there was, I mean, this is an enormous project for the sector, and there's been an awful lot of work. I mean, this project's been, you know, in the background being scoped up. You know, it's been several years prior to COVID that this has all been in the making. I'm pretty sure there's information there somewhere, which I'm quite happy to see if I can dig out.
Linking to that point around the metrics, and perhaps even whether there was potential to survey those who are frequent users of it to see if they report any positive differences, because it speaks to the comment earlier, you know, demonstrate that this investment in you know, the collaborative approach to the software and information management is delivering outcomes, that just to help gather some of that evidence to support that continuing position.
Yeah, absolutely, and but also acknowledging that by virtue of the fact of working in collaboration to actually purchase the software as a, you know, as a benefit in and of itself, because it's just unaffordable for us otherwise. But yeah, we'll do.
Right, thanks very much. Okay, we've got the report to receive, recommendation to receive the report.
Yep.
Linda will move that, seconded by Phil.
Aye.
Thank you very much, Bert.
Thanks all. Thank you. Cheers, everyone.
Now, we're due to move into public excluded for the last 4 items. We are running a bit ahead of time. We're going to have a tea break, but we
don't need a tea break.
Well,
we could also that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's your ETA on public job?
Well, we were due to finish at about 1:30, but we can probably do this now.
So
Scott,
can we go into public excluded first? I think it's important thing. So
We've got a council workshop.
yeah. Can we go into public excluded? Just
Scott.
yeah. No, we need to go do the reasons for public excluded first before we switch off the live stream. Yeah.
Right, so Mariette.
Okay, so the reason to move into public excluded is to deal with the information of public excluded minutes of the previous meeting, 22 February 2024. Item 2, the bad debt to be written off, and the third one is to review of investment management services for April 2024. The reasons is to both for item 1 and item 3 to enable and logical authority holding the information to carry out without prejudice or disadvantage commercial activities. And then item 2, the bad debts, is to protect the privacy of natural persons, including that of deceased natural persons.
Thank you. Somebody like to move, Jeremy, and seconded by Phil. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried.
We share them now. Who's